On the night I turned 18, my parents, Sharon and Robert, handed me two gifts. The first was a $50 bill, folded until it was soft as old cloth. The second was the sharp, definitive click of the front door's deadbolt sliding into place behind me. "It's for Chloe," my mother, Sharon, said, her eyes fixed on a point just past my shoulder, refusing to meet mine. "She has real promise, Cassandra. She needs the college savings. She needs the room. She deserves a shot at a real future. And I don't?" The words were a whisper, nearly lost as the first drops of a cold October rain began to spatter on the porch steps. My father, Robert, remained silent, his contribution a simple, final point toward the street. "We've held up our end," he said, his voice flat. "You're an adult now." Then the door swung shut. The lock turned. The porch light went out, plunging me into a damp darkness. I stood there, shivering as the rain soaked through my thin jacket, clutching that one limp $50 bill. To them, it was an ending. To them, it was just $50. They had no idea it was a beginning. They couldn't have known that 6 years later my sister Chloe would step into my office, desperate for a job, and I would be the one holding her future in my hands. But before we get to that, please take a moment to like this video, subscribe for more stories, and let me know in the comments where you're watching from today. I'd love to hear from you. That first night, I walked until my sneakers were squelching with rainwater. The downpour was relentless, the air growing colder with each gust of wind. I had $50 and a jacket that was never meant for this kind of weather. My phone was a useless brick. My parents had cut the service that morning, a necessary expense, as my father had put it. I eventually found a bus stop with a small overhang, but the wind whipped the rain in sideways, offering little protection. I huddled on the bench, pulling my knees tight to my chest. Each time a car's headlight swept over me, I flinched, feeling exposed and worthless. Was I worthless? My mother's words played on a loop in my head. "She deserves a future." The unspoken part, "not you," was the loudest. I must have dozed off, because I woke with a jolt to a body so stiff and cold it felt like it might shatter. The sun was rising, casting a bleak gray light on the wet world. The rain had finally stopped. I stayed on that bench for 3 days. My first purchase as a legal adult was from a nearby gas station, a small bag of potato chips and a bottle of water. It came to $4.25. I had $45.75 left. I tried to clean myself up in the gas station restroom, but the cashier, a weary-looking woman, stared at me with undisguised suspicion. "You can't loiter in here," she said, her tone less mean than exhausted. "I'm sorry," I mumbled. I was buying some water." "You already bought it," she pointed out. I retreated to my bench. It felt like my territory now. The second night was even colder. Sleep was impossible. I just sat there, my body shaking in uncontrollable tremors, and watched the cars go by. I thought about Chloe. She was probably tucked into my old bed, her bed now. She'd be warm. She'd probably be complaining about some homework assignment, and my mom would be in there, bringing her a cup of hot tea. The image was so vivid it felt like a physical blow. A wave of pure hatred washed over me, so intense it was dizzying. And then came the shame. My dad had always said my anger was a problem. Maybe this was what he meant. On the third day, the gnawing hunger was bad, but the shivering was worse. It wasn't just shivering, my entire body was convulsing. I felt strangely hot, yet my skin was ice cold to the touch. I gave up trying to sit up and just lay down on the bench, the freezing metal seeping through my jacket. I closed my eyes, just for a moment. I woke up somewhere else. The world was white, and the light was so bright it made my eyes ache. A rhythmic, steady beeping sound echoed in the room. I was warm. I was in a clean bed. A thin tube was taped to my arm. A woman in blue scrubs was looking at a monitor beside me. Where am I? My voice was a dry, rasping sound. "You're at Mercy General Hospital," she said. Her face was kind, with tired lines around her eyes. "You have a severe fever. It's pneumonia. Someone called an ambulance. They found you unconscious at a bus stop." I tried to sit up, but a wave of vertigo slammed me back against the pillow. Then the panic hit, a sharp, cold spike of fear. I can't be here. I don't have insurance. I can't pay for this. The nurse gently brushed my hair from my forehead. Her hand was cool and comforting. "Right now, you just need to focus on resting. We've been giving you fluids and antibiotics. You were dangerously dehydrated. I was in the hospital for 2 days. They fed me warm broth and apple juice." The nurse's name was Brenda. She asked gentle questions. "Is there any family we can call for you?" I stared at the sterile white blanket covering me. "No, there's no one." "What about a home address?" "I don't have one." She paused in her note-taking and looked at me. Really looked, for the first time. "Okay, honey," she said softly. "We'll work on that later." When it was time for my discharge, a woman in a business suit came into my room. She held a clipboard and had a stern, impersonal expression. "Cassandra Vance." "Yes. We're discharging you. The doctor has written a prescription for an antibiotic you'll need. We'll give you the script, but first, we need to address the bill for your stay." My stomach felt like it was full of ice. I told the nurse, "I can't pay. I have $45. The woman's face hardened. "Ma'am, we rendered emergency services. I didn't ask to be brought here," I whispered, knowing how ungrateful and childish it sounded. But the terror was overwhelming. "The total comes to $4,200, she stated, her voice devoid of emotion. I felt the air leave my lungs. It was the same feeling as the door closing on the porch. $4,200. It might as well have been $1 million. I would be in debt for the rest of my life. I would never escape this. I started crying, not loudly, but with silent, hot tears that streamed down my face and into my hair. "I can't," I whispered. "Please." The woman sighed, a sound of pure annoyance. "We can discuss a payment plan, but a down payment is required. Otherwise, this will be sent to a collections agency." "Ma'am?" A deep, calm voice came from the doorway. A large man stood there, dressed in a flannel shirt and a worn-out baseball cap. He looked like a truck driver. "Excuse me," the billing woman said, clearly irritated. "This is a private matter." "I'm the one who called 911, he said, his voice a gentle rumble. "I was just coming to check on her. I overheard." He looked at me. "You doing okay, kid?" I could only shake my head, overcome with shame. He turned his attention back to the woman. "The bill. 4,200? "Yes, sir." As I was explaining, he cut her off by reaching into his back pocket and pulling out a battered leather wallet. He produced a credit card. "I'll take care of it." The billing woman's jaw dropped. Mine did too. "Sir, that's the full amount. You don't have to do that." "I know what I'm doing," he said simply, holding the card out to her. "Just run it." She took it, looking utterly bewildered, and hurried out of the room. The man looked at me again. "You looked awful cold on that bench. I passed you 3 times on my delivery route. That last time you weren't moving. I'm glad I stopped." "Why?" I croaked. "Why would you do that for me?" He looked down at his boots. "My own daughter ran off a few years back. She was angry, a lot like you look. I hope someone would have done the same for her. You look to be about her age." The woman returned, handing him the card and a receipt. He scrawled his signature on it. "You're all set, Ms. Vance," the woman said to me, her tone noticeably softer now. "You're free to go." She left, closing the door quietly behind her. The man walked over to the small table beside my bed and pulled out his wallet again. This time, he took out a $50 bill, a crisp one. He placed it on the table. My throat was thick with emotion. "No, I can't take that. You just paid." "That was for the hospital," he said. "This is for you, a fresh start. Don't waste it, kid." He gave a small nod. "Name's George Miller. You take care of yourself." And with that, he walked out. I never even got to properly thank him. I sat there for a long time, just looking at the new $50 bill. It was stiff and clean, nothing like the one my mother had given me. When Nurse Brenda came back with my discharge papers, I was still staring at it. She saw the paid in full stamp on my chart. "Wow," she said, a small smile touching her lips. "You know, in 20 years of nursing, I've never seen that happen." She placed a hand on my shoulder. "Someone saw you, Cassandra. Don't you ever forget that." I folded the new $50 and put it in my pocket, right next to the wrinkled, worn-out one from my parents. I walked out of the hospital into the bright, cold afternoon. I still had nowhere to go. I was still completely alone, but Brenda was wrong. 2 people had seen me, George Miller and her. And for the first time in my life, that felt like it was enough. The hospital had washed my clothes, which they returned to me in a paper bag. They were still old and worn, but they were clean. I had my 2 $50 bills and a prescription I couldn't afford. My first priority was finding a place to sleep that wasn't a public bench. Tucked into my discharge folder, Nurse Brenda had slipped a small piece of paper with an address and a name. The Beacon Center. "It's a women's shelter," she had whispered to me. "It's clean and safe. Ask for Ms. Peterson. She's tough, but she's fair." It was a 3-mile walk, and every step sent a dull ache through my chest. The pneumonia was technically gone, but my lungs felt bruised and weak. I was scared, picturing a grim, dangerous place like I'd seen in movies. The Beacon Center was nothing like that. It was an old, sturdy brick building, maybe a former school. The windows were clean, and there were even dead flowers in a window box, a sign that someone had at least tried. I pushed open the heavy wooden door into a warm front room that smelled of bleach and coffee. A woman with short, salt and pepper hair and glasses on a chain sat behind a high desk. "Can I help you?" she asked, looking up. I'm looking for Miss Peterson." "You've found her," she said, her voice crisp and businesslike. "My name is Cassandra Vance, a nurse at Mercy General. She said you might have a bed." Ms. Peterson studied me, her eyes sharp and missing nothing. She took in the hospital wristband I hadn't yet removed, my inadequate jacket, the fear I couldn't hide. "A nurse, was it?" she said. "Well, we're full. We're always full." My heart plummeted. I had no other options. I must have looked as defeated as I felt, because she let out a long sigh. "But we keep one cot in the office for hospital discharges, one night only. That's the rule." She gestured to a door behind her desk. "You can have that. We have rules here, Cassandra Vance. You get a bed, 3 meals, and a shower. In return, you do chores, and you have 30 days to find a job. No job, you're out. If you get one, you save 70% of every paycheck. We'll help you set up an account. After 90 days of employment, you move to our transitional housing program. Work, rebuild, move on. That's how it works here. You use drugs, you drink, you cause trouble?" "No," I said quickly. "No, ma'am, I don't. I need a place." "Everyone just needs a place," she said. But she took a key from a hook on the wall. "Showers are in room 10, towels in the closet. Dinner is at 6. Chore list is on the kitchen bulletin board. You're on breakfast cleanup tomorrow, 5:30 a.m. sharp." "Thank you," I whispered. "Don't thank me," Ms. Peterson said, her attention already back on her paperwork. "Thank yourself by getting a job. There's a board in the dining hall with local postings. Start there." The cot was in a small, tidy office. It was just a thin mattress on a metal frame with a single blanket and a pillow, but it was the most beautiful sight I had ever seen. I took a long, hot shower, scrubbing away the grime of the street and the hospital. I put my clean clothes back on, cut off the hospital wristband with a pair of scissors from Ms. Peterson's desk, and tucked my two $50 bills into my shoe for safekeeping. That night, I slept for 10 solid hours. The cot was hard, but I was safe, warm, and no one was going to make me leave. At 5:30 a.m., I was in the communal kitchen. A few other women were there, moving quietly, all with tired, distant eyes. We scrubbed pots, wiped down tables, and mopped the floor. No one spoke much. We just worked, all of us running from our own ghosts. After chores, I studied the corkboard in the dining hall. It was a mosaic of flyers: cleaning help wanted, temp for data entry, dishwasher needed. One stood out. It was a bright yellow flyer with a drawing of a coffee cup. Help wanted, all shifts, apply within the Corner Spot Cafe. I knew the place. I'd passed it on my walk from the hospital. It was a long walk, but I could do it. I went to Ms. Peterson. "I need to get these antibiotics," I said, showing her the prescription. She nodded. "We have a small fund for that, one-time assistance." She took the paper and made a phone call. An hour later, I had my medication. I took the first pill with water from the kitchen tap and then started the walk to the Corner Spot Cafe. It was a classic, old-fashioned diner, a small silver building that smelled of fried onions and burnt coffee. Inside, every booth was packed. A woman with dark hair streaked with gray, pulled into a tight bun, was a whirlwind of motion, flying between the counter and the kitchen, shouting orders in Italian to the cook, then turning to a customer with a dazzling smile. "What can I get for you, hun?" she'd say. I hovered awkwardly by the door, feeling completely in the way. Finally, she noticed me. "You eating or just standing there, kid?" We got a line. I'm here about the job," I said, my voice barely audible over the din. "The flyer." She stopped, placing a coffee pot on the counter. She looked me up and down, a thorough appraisal just like Ms. Peterson's. "You ever been a waitress?" "No, but I'll work hard. I'll do anything. I'll wash dishes. I'll mop the floors. I learn really fast." She stared at me for a long moment. I was sure she was about to dismiss me. "This ain't easy work," she finally said. "It's hot. It's fast. My regulars are picky, and my cook is a grouch." She yelled toward the kitchen. "You hear that, Marco?" A torrent of angry Italian came flying back. The woman just laughed. "I'm Maria Rossi. This is my place. You want a shot?" She grabbed a clean white apron from under the counter and tossed it at me. It hit me squarely in the chest. "Go in the back, wash your hands, and start bussing tables. Don't talk, just watch me. If you get in my way, you're gone. You break a dish, it comes out of your pay. Tips are split with the kitchen at the end of the night. You got that?" "Yes," I said, my heart pounding. "Yes, thank you." "Don't thank me yet," she said, already turning away. "Table 4 needs more coffee." My first day was a chaotic blur of noise, plates clattering, the order printer screeching, Maria yelling, Marco yelling, the constant sizzle of the grill. My feet ached. My back throbbed. I just bussed tables, hauling heavy tubs of dirty dishes to the back, where the dishwasher, a quiet man named Pedro, would just grunt and point to where he wanted them. I worked a 12-hour shift. At 2 a.m., Maria finally locked the front door. She sat at the counter, smoking a cigarette and counting out the day's cash. "You're still here," she observed. "You didn't tell me to leave." She pushed a small stack of worn bills across the counter. $35, your cut of the tips. Be here tomorrow, 4 p.m. I took the money. It was more than my original $50 from my parents. This I had earned. Go home, kid, Maria said. Get some sleep. You look like death warmed over. I walked back to the Beacon Center through the dark, empty streets, but I wasn't afraid. I was exhausted, sore, and I smelled like French fries, but I wasn't afraid. I got to my cot, put the $35 in my shoe with my other two 50s, and lay down. I thought about my family, wondering if they'd even noticed I was gone. The thought was still a cold, hard knot in my stomach. But then I thought of Maria and Miss Peterson and George and Brenda. I wasn't on the porch anymore. I wasn't on the bench. I had a bed and a job. It wasn't a future yet, but it was a start, and I had done it all by myself. I worked at the diner for a year, then another. My life settled into a rhythm. Wake up at the shelter, do chores, walk to the cafe, work until the early morning, walk back, sleep, and repeat. I eventually moved from the cot in the office to a shared room with 3 other women. As Ms. Peterson required, I opened a savings account and diligently deposited 70% of my earnings each week. The balance grew slowly but steadily. I bought myself a new pair of non-slip black shoes from a thrift store, then a warmer coat. I was a good employee, quiet, fast, and observant. I memorized the menu and the regulars. Mr. Henderson in booth 3 liked his coffee black the moment he sat down. The college students on Friday nights always ordered mountains of fries with extra ranch. I learned to anticipate needs, grabbing the coffee pot when I saw Mr. Henderson's car, putting in the fry order before the students had even settled in their seats. Maria noticed. "You're not dumb, Cassandra," she said one night, which was the highest form of praise from her. She promoted me from busing to waiting tables. My tips quadrupled, and my savings account started to look like a real number. But the diner was pure chaos. It was Maria's chaos. She was a phenomenal cook and a decent boss, but she had no sense of organization. She ordered supplies whenever she remembered, which meant we'd run out of ketchup on a busy Saturday, or have 3 cases of fancy pickles going bad in the stockroom while we were completely out of bread. Marco, the cook, would get furious and throw pans. Maria would yell back. The stress was constant. I had come to hate chaos. My life had been nothing but. I craved order, quiet, predictability. So I started to watch the flow of the diner. I kept a small notebook in my apron. Mondays were slammed for breakfast, but dead for dinner. Tuesdays, we always ran out of rye bread by noon. On Fridays, the beer delivery always arrived at 6 p.m., right in the middle of the dinner rush, and the driver would block the kitchen entrance with his dolly. It was all so inefficient. It was stupid. One night after my shift, too exhausted to begin the long walk home, I grabbed a stack of clean napkins and started to write. I drew charts. I made lists. Ketchup. Order 2 cases on Monday, not 1. Bread. Double order Monday through Thursday. Pickles. Stop ordering so many. Beer delivery. Call company. Request morning drop-off. Offer driver free coffee. I mapped out new prep schedules. I mentally reorganized the walk-in cooler, moving high-use items like milk, eggs, and butter to the front, instead of behind the crates of pickled pig's feet that no one ever ordered. I did this for a week, accumulating a stack of 20 napkins covered in my neat, precise handwriting. It was a system, a way to make sense of the madness. I was terrified of showing Maria. She was old school and did things her way. She might laugh, or worse, fire me for overstepping. But the next Tuesday, we ran out of rye bread again. A customer complained loudly, and Maria was livid. After the rush died down, I approached her, my hands trembling. "Maria? What is it, Cassandra?" "I'm busy." I just pushed the stack of napkins across the counter toward her. I made some notes about supplies and the delivery schedules. It's just an idea." She looked at the napkins, then at me, then picked them up. She read the first one, then the second. She read every single one, her expression unreadable. I wanted the floor to swallow me whole. When she finished, she set the napkins down and tapped them with her finger. "You've been counting my pickles? I noticed we throw a lot of them away." She was silent for a full minute. I was already planning my escape, just grabbing my coat and running. Then she yelled, "Marco, get out here!" Marco emerged from the kitchen, wiping his hands on his apron, looking annoyed. "What?" Maria handed him the stack of napkins. "Read this. This is the new system." Marco looked at the napkins, then at me, and grumbled something in Italian, but he read them all. He looked up at Maria. "She's right about the bread." "I know she's right about the bread," Maria snapped. "She's right about the beer guy, too. He's a moron." She turned her gaze to me. "You, Cassandra, you're not just a waitress anymore. You come in at noon tomorrow. You're going to call the suppliers. You're going to make this," she tapped the napkins again, "happen. I'll pay you an extra $5 an hour." And that was that. The next day, I came in at noon and sat in Maria's tiny, cluttered office. I called the beer company, polite but firm, explaining that 6 p.m. deliveries were no longer acceptable. By the end of the call, they'd agreed to a 10 a.m. delivery slot. I changed the bread order and cut the pickle order in half. I went into the walk-in cooler with Pedro, the dishwasher, and we reorganized the entire space. He barely spoke, but when we were finished, he gave a single satisfied nod and said, "Is good." That Friday, the beer arrived at 10 a.m. The driver was thrilled with his free coffee. The dinner rush was smoother than I'd ever seen it. The following Tuesday, we had plenty of rye bread. The diner was still busy, still loud, but the frantic chaos was gone, replaced by a steady, efficient hum, the rhythm I had written on those napkins. A few weeks later, Maria and I were closing up after a perfect night. "You know, kid," she said, staring out into the empty dining room, "this place has always been a mess. I'm a mess. It's just how I operate." I stopped wiping the counter, suddenly worried. Is the new way? Is it bad? Bad? She let out a short, rough laugh. "Profits are up 20%. Marco hasn't thrown a pan in a week. I'm taking my first real vacation in 10 years. She swiveled on her stool to face me. "People like you, Cassandra, you're rare. You see all the broken, messy pieces, and you just know how to make them fit together. You don't just organize chaos, you direct it." She stubbed out her cigarette. "Don't you ever let anyone tell you that's not a real skill. That's a weapon." I finished cleaning the counter. I had my own place now, a small studio apartment I'd secured through the Beacon's transitional program. I was saving money. I was safe. But Maria's words. That was the first time anyone had ever looked at what I could do and called it valuable. My parents had called it being bossy and cold. Maria called it a weapon. I liked her word for it much better. I worked for Maria for nearly 2 years. By the time I was 20, I was effectively the diner's manager, though she never used the title. I handled ordering, scheduling, and payroll while still waiting tables on weekends for the tips. My savings account had a 5-figure number in it. It was enough to think about community college, maybe. I was stable, but I felt stuck. I loved making the systems work, but I didn't want to run a diner for the rest of my life. What else could I do with this skill? I didn't have a high school diploma, let alone a degree. I just had a system built on a pile of napkins. One rainy Tuesday, the bell on the diner door jingled, and I looked up from wiping down the counter. It was George Miller. I froze. I hadn't seen him in the 2 years since he'd saved my life at the hospital. He looked exactly the same. Flannel shirt, faded cap, kind eyes. He saw me, and his eyes widened in recognition. "Well, I'll be," he rumbled, a huge, genuine smile spreading across his face. "You're the girl from the hospital. Cassandra." "You remember my name," I said, my voice thick with emotion. "Sure I do. You look a hell of a lot better than you did on that bench. You work here now?" "I do," I said, grabbing a menu. It's so good to see you. I never got to thank you properly." "No thanks needed, kid," he said, sliding into a booth. "Just happy to see you on your feet." I poured him a cup of coffee, my hands shaking slightly. This man had literally saved me. "I still have it," I blurted out. "Have what?" "The $50. The one you gave me. I never spent it." He smiled into his coffee. "That's good to hear." He ordered a cheeseburger, and as he ate, he told me his trucking route had changed, bringing him through this part of town again. "I can't believe you just walked in here," I said. "It's a small world sometimes." He finished his meal and paid, but lingered at the booth, looking at a flyer he'd pulled from his jacket. "You happy here?" he asked. "It's a good job," I said carefully. "Maria, my boss, she's great." "But it's not a career," he stated. It wasn't a question. He saw me, just like he had 2 years ago. "I work for a company called Apex Hauling," he said. "Logistics, trucking. We move freight all over the country. They're hiring like crazy in the main office." He slid the flyer across the table. "Operations, dispatch, that sort of work." I looked down. "Now hiring. Operations coordinator." It listed the requirements: bachelor's degree in logistics or business preferred, 3 to 5 years of experience. I pushed it back. "George, that's so nice of you, but I can't. Look at the requirements. I don't even have a high school diploma. I work in a diner." "What do you do here, exactly?" he asked. "I'm a waitress, and I manage things." "What kind of things?" "The schedules, the supply deliveries, the food inventory. I make sure we have what we need, and I make sure the delivery trucks don't block up the kitchen during a rush." George just stared at me. "So you manage scheduling, deliveries, and inventory?" "I guess," I said, "but it's just for a diner." "It's not." "Logistics, kid," he said, tapping the flyer. "That's what you think logistics is? It's just a fancy word for what you're already doing. Getting things from point A to point B on time without them spoiling or costing too much. You're just doing it with pickles instead of engine parts." He stood up. "The hiring manager is Frank Doyle. He's not a degree guy. He's a get-it-done guy. What's the worst that can happen? He says no." He left the flyer on the table and walked toward the door. "You already paid for my burger," he said when I tried to give him his change. "Tell Maria it was the best I've had all year." That night I went into the office and found my original stack of napkins, which I'd kept in the back of a filing cabinet. I printed out the new schedules and order forms I'd created on Maria's old computer. I put it all in a clean cardboard box. The next day, I called the number on the flyer and asked for Frank Doyle, my voice trembling. "He's busy," a secretary said. "Can I take a message?" "My name is Cassandra Vance," I said, trying to sound confident. "George Miller suggested I call about the operations coordinator position." "Oh, George?" Her voice warmed immediately. "Hold on, let me see if he's free." A moment later, a gruff voice came on the line. "Frank Doyle." "Mr. Doyle? My name is Cassandra Vance. Your driver, George Miller, told me to call about the operations job." "George? Yeah, he's one of my best. What's this about?" "I'd like to apply, sir. Got a resume?" "No, sir, I don't. But I have a system I can show you. I work at the Corner Spot Cafe." "George said you might—" "The cafe," he cut me off. "Down on 4th Street? Best burger in the city. You're the one who fixed their service, aren't you? Used to take an hour to get a cup of coffee in there." Yes, sir, I said, stunned. That was me. Be here tomorrow, 10 a.m., and bring your system. He hung up. I had to tell Maria I had a doctor's appointment, and I felt sick lying to her. The Apex hauling office was in a sprawling gray industrial park. I wore my best thrift store outfit and clutched my box of napkins and printouts. Frank Doyle's office was a chaotic mess of maps and binders. He was a large man with a weary face who didn't invite me to sit. "Okay," he said. "Show me." I opened my box and laid my napkins out on his desk. I showed him the old, messy order sheets and the new, streamlined schedules. I explained how I rerouted the beer delivery and tracked inventory to cut waste. He listened without a word, his expression unreadable. He picked up one of the napkins. "This is a napkin." "Yes, sir. It's where I started." He looked from my charts to me, his silence stretching for an eternity. I began to gather my papers, my face burning with humiliation. This was a mistake. "I have 50 people in this office," he said finally, his voice quiet. 40 of them have business degrees, and not one of them could have done this." I froze. "What?" "This," he said, holding up the napkin. "This isn't something you learn from a book. This is instinct. You don't just learn this stuff, you see it. You see the patterns. I can teach someone to use a spreadsheet. I can't teach them how to see." He tossed the napkin back onto the desk. "You're right. You don't have a degree. You have zero relevant experience. You're a waitress. Hiring you is a huge risk." My heart sank. "I understand. I'm sorry to have wasted your... But I trust George," he cut in. "And I trust my gut. And my gut says you're the kind of person who's going to stop me from losing a truckload of frozen shrimp in St. Louis, which almost happened last week." He pointed a thick finger at me. "You've got instinct. We can work with that. You start Monday. $19 an hour, 90-day probation. You screw up, you're out. You do for me what you did for that diner, and you'll be running this place in 5 years." I was speechless. I just nodded. "Good," he said. "Now get out. I'm busy." I walked out of that office and sat in my old beat-up car. For the second time since my parents had shut that door, I cried. But these weren't tears of fear or sadness. They were tears of pure, unadulterated hope. "We can work with that." It was another door opening. This one wasn't a shelter or a diner. This was a future, the one my mother said I didn't deserve, and I was about to walk right through it. My first day at Apex Hauling was like being dropped into a foreign country. I was a waitress surrounded by professionals talking about inbound logistics, bills of lading, and supply chain optimization. Frank Doyle, my new boss, walked me to a small metal desk in a noisy, open-plan office. "Don't talk," he said. "Just listen and watch. You're an operations assistant. Your job is to learn." So I did. I listened to how dispatchers spoke to drivers, how coordinators placated angry clients. My first task was mind-numbingly boring, entering delivery confirmations from the previous day into a spreadsheet. But I approached it like I had the diner. I looked for the pattern. Within a week, I found it. The same 3 drivers were consistently late. The same client, a glass bottle manufacturer, always called to complain about breakages. I didn't say anything. I just took notes in my personal notebook. I stayed late every night, teaching myself the company's spreadsheet and routing software, reading training manuals, and eating a sandwich I'd packed at my desk. After a month, Frank called me into his office. "Probation's fine," he said. "You're quiet, you do the work." "But I didn't hire you to be quiet. I hired you for that napkin thing. What have you seen?" I was ready. I opened my notebook. "Our 3 least efficient drivers all start from the South Yard," I said, my voice steady. "But their first pickups are in the north. They're driving an hour empty just to start their day. It's a huge waste of time and fuel. I turned the page, and the glass bottle company were loading their pallets next to heavy machinery parts. When the trucks take turns too fast, the heavy pallets shift and crush the glass. Frank stared at me, his face impassive. And I said, if we reroute the South Yard drivers to South Side pickups, we save over 20 hours of drive time a week. And if we load the fragile glass in front of the heavy machinery, not beside it, the cargo won't shift and crush it. It's a basic loading dock protocol. Frank picked up his phone and called the dispatch manager. Move Miller, Davis, and Chen to South Side routes, starting tomorrow. He hung up and immediately called the warehouse foreman. From now on, glass loads go in front of heavy machinery, not beside it. I don't care if it takes longer. Just do it. He hung up again and looked at me. You're not a data entry clerk anymore. You're my new route optimizer. I'm giving you a $2 raise. That was how it began. For the next 2 years, Apex was my entire life. I was the first to arrive and the last to leave. Frank became my mentor, teaching me how to negotiate fuel contracts and read a PL statement. I taught myself everything else, taking free online courses in advanced database management. I didn't just solve problems. I started to anticipate them. I built a system to track weather patterns against our delivery schedules. A major storm is hitting Ohio on Wednesday, I'd announced to the team. Reroute all Midwest freight through Kentucky. It'll add 4 hours to the trip, but it's better than having 3 trucks stranded for 2 days. Frank trusted me. That one decision saved the company over $80,000. I was promoted, and then promoted again. By 23, I was the senior operations manager for the entire company, making more money than I had ever imagined. I bought a new car and moved into a modern apartment building with a doorman, but I hit a glass ceiling. Apex was an old company, and the owners, not Frank, were old school. They liked me, but they would never make me an executive. I was still the waitress they took a chance on, the one without a degree. One day, a major client, a national electronics retailer, threatened to break their contract over late deliveries. Frank was on vacation, and the owners were in a panic. Fix it, Cassandra, they told me. I spent the next 72 hours locked in my office, fueled by coffee, analyzing every piece of data. The problem wasn't our drivers or our routes. It was the client's own inefficient warehouses. Their understaffed receiving departments were letting our trucks sit at their docks for up to 8 hours before unloading. I built a presentation, not just identifying the problem, but offering a detailed solution, a new, optimized receiving schedule for their own staff. I presented it directly to their CEO. When I finished, he was silent for a moment. "You're right," he said. "You're 100% right. We kept the contract." 2 weeks later, that same CEO called my private line. "I was impressed, Ms. Vance," he said. "More than impressed. But Apex is too slow to adapt." "You're not. I want to hire you to do what you do. For us." "I don't think," I started to say. "No," he cut me off. "Not hire you. I want to contract with you. Start your own company. You handle our logistics. You'll be my first client, and I know 3 other CEOs who will sign with you the day you open your doors." The floor fell out from under me. My own company, I told Frank, who wasn't sad at all. He was proud. "Told you you'd be running the place," he said, smiling. "Just didn't realize it would be your own." I took every penny I had saved and rented a small, empty office. I bought a desk, a chair, and a powerful computer. I named my company Ascend Logistics Solutions because I had ascended from nothing. Before I did anything else, I went to a frame shop with 3 items. The first was the wrinkled, soft $50 bill from my parents. The second was the plastic hospital wristband from Mercy General that read, Vance, Cassandra. Address unknown. The third was a small faded photo of the Beacon Center. I had them mounted in simple black frames and hung them on the wall of my new, empty office. That was 6 years ago. Today, I'm 29 years old. Ascend Logistics Solutions employs 80 people and has offices in 3 states. We manage logistics for some of the biggest retail companies in the country. My own office is on the top floor, with glass walls overlooking the city. The 3 relics still hang on my wall, the $50 to remind me what they thought I was worth, the wristband to remind me where I started, and the photo to remind me that work, rebuild, move on is a mantra that can save a life. My old life feels like a story I once read about someone else. Until today. My days are a fortress of routine I've built to keep chaos at bay. I was in a budget meeting, arguing about fuel futures with my CFO, David, when my assistant, Jenna, knocked softly on the open door. Jenna is bright, organized, and slightly terrified of me. "I'm sorry to interrupt, Ms. Vance," she said, "but I have the final resumes for the new public relations manager position. You asked to see the top 3. "Leave them, Jenna," I said, without looking up from my spreadsheet. "I'll review them later." "Actually," she said, stepping into the room, "the top candidate is a perfect fit. I wanted to get her in for an interview as soon as possible. 3 years at a top firm in Chicago, glowing references. I think you'll want to meet her." I sighed, annoyed. "Fine. What's her name?" "Chloe Vance." I didn't move. The numbers on the screen blurred. David's voice faded into a dull hum. All I could hear was the steady beep of the heart monitor from the hospital. I could feel the cold rain on my skin. I could hear my mother's voice. "It's for Chloe. She deserves a future." My sister here. It had to be a coincidence. "Cassie, are you with us?" David asked. The projections. "Give me a minute, David," I said, my voice low and strange to my own ears. I looked at Jenna, clasping my shaking hands together on the desk. "Give me the file." She handed it over. The resume was on expensive, heavy stock paper, and there was the name, Chloe K. Vance, our shared middle initial. I scanned the page. B.A. in Communications, Indiana University. Dean's List, of course. The college they had saved for, the one they gave to her instead of me. She'd been laid off 2 months ago. She was looking for a job, and she had applied to my company. My first thought was a flash of white-hot rage. How dare she? My second was ice cold. She doesn't know. She saw Ascend Logistics Solutions, not Cassandra Vance. She was just a name applying for a job at a company where I was the CEO. "Ms. Vance?" Jenna asked again, her voice small. "Do you know her?" I looked up from the resume, my vision sharp again. The fortress walls were back up. "No, Jenna," I said, my voice perfectly calm. "I don't know her. I didn't know the polished 26-year-old on this piece of paper. The last time I saw Chloe, she was the spoiled, pretty teenager who watched from the living room window as I stood shivering on the porch. She never opened the door. She just watched. "She looks qualified," I said, handing the folder back to Jenna. "Schedule her for an interview. Tuesday, 10 a.m. "Oh, great," Jenna said. "Will you and David be handling it?" "No," I said. "I'll handle this one myself. Alone." "Just you?" Jenna asked, surprised. This was highly unusual. "Yes." "Just me," I said. "That will be all." After Jenna and David left, I walked to the glass wall of my office and looked down at the city. My sister was going to walk into my office and ask me for a job. I turned and looked at the 3 frames on my wall. For years, I had focused on survival, on building. I'd never thought about revenge or forgiveness. I had simply erased them. But they weren't gone, and one of them was coming here. A slow, cold smile spread across my face. It was the smile of someone who has just been dealt the winning hand in a game they never even knew they were playing. "Schedule her for Tuesday," I whispered to the empty room. Same family, same story, completely different side of the desk. The week leading up to Tuesday was the longest of my life. I was a machine of pure control and ice. On Tuesday morning, I dressed with deliberate care in a simple dark blue sheath dress, the color of a deep bruise. My hair was pulled back in a severe bun, no makeup. At 9:58 a.m., my phone buzzed. "Ms. Vance, your 10 o'clock is here. Chloe Vance." "Thank you, Jenna," I said, my heart a steady cold drum. "Send her in." I stood and walked to the window, my back to the door. I heard it open. "Ms. Vance?" a bright, confident voice said. "Thank you so much for seeing me." I turned, and there she was. She was 26, beautiful and polished, wearing an expensive-looking pantsuit. She had our mother's hair and a warm, practiced smile. She was everything they had ever wanted her to be, and she had no idea who I was. She was just looking at a CEO, a 29-year-old woman who had built an empire. She did not see the sister she'd abandoned. I walked toward her and took her outstretched hand. Hers was soft and warm. Mine was cold as stone. "Miss Vance," I said, "thank you for coming in. Please have a seat." For a fraction of a second, her smile faltered. My voice, maybe a flicker of recognition. But then the moment passed. She was here for a job. "This is an incredible office," she said, sitting in the chair opposite my desk. "The work Ascend has done is legendary." She was good. I sat down behind the desk, my fortress. "We're not here to discuss my office, Miss Vance. We're here to discuss you. Your resume says you left your last firm due to a corporate restructuring." "That's right," she said, the answer smooth. "My entire department was downsized, but I see it as an opportunity. I believe my skills in media relations would be a perfect fit for your continued growth." She was smart and confident. This was the person they chose, the future they stole from me. "Tell me about your Q3 media campaign," I said, my voice flat. She launched into a well-rehearsed answer, talking about market penetration and brand synergy. As she spoke, her eyes wandered around my office, taking in the awards, the view, and then they landed on the wall behind me, on the 3 simple black frames. I watched as her words began to slow. She was still talking, but her focus was gone. She squinted, her eyes fixed on the middle frame, the plastic hospital wristband. Then her gaze shifted to the one next to it, the old, faded, wrinkled $50 bill. Her voice died in her throat. The practiced smile evaporated. Her eyes snapped from the wall to my face, and this time, she wasn't seeing a CEO. She was seeing me. The blood drained from her face. "Harper?" It was a tiny, broken whisper, a gasp. I just watched her. I didn't smile. I didn't move. I just sat in my office in my power and watched my sister shatter. I don't understand," she stammered. "What is this? How are you?" "Mom and Dad said you ran away. They said you were angry and just left." "They lied," I said. It was not an accusation. It was a simple fact. "Oh my God," she whispered, her eyes darting between the $50 bill and the hospital band, piecing together the life I had lived while she was on the dean's list. Tears began to stream down her face, ruining her perfect makeup. "Harper, I didn't know. I swear, I didn't know." I leaned forward, my voice still quiet but now cold as ice. "We're here to discuss your qualifications, Ms. Vance. You were telling me about your Q3 media campaign. Please continue." She stared at me, utterly shocked. "What? Your qualifications," I repeated. "If you're not prepared, this interview is over." I had her. The golden child was sitting in front of me, desperate. No, she said, her voice shaking as she wiped at her tears. No, I'm prepared. I want this job. Good, I said, looking down at my notepad. Let's continue. Tell me about a time you had to handle a significant conflict between two parties. She flinched. A standard interview question, but for us, it was a landmine. She tried to answer, falling back on her PR training, describing a budget dispute between marketing and sales. And how did you resolve it? I asked. I found a compromise, she said, regaining a sliver of confidence. I moved some of the budget from the sales team and gave it to marketing. I worked to ensure everyone got what they deserved. The room fell silent. Fairness, I said, letting the word hang in the air. Everyone got what they deserved. That's an interesting concept. You took from one group to give to another. To ensure the project's success, you cut off one person's future to pay for another's. No, she whispered. It wasn't like that. Wasn't it? I asked. I let the question sit there. One last question, Ms. Vance. Why do you want to work for Ascend Logistics? The Polish was gone. She looked at me, and for the first time I saw someone real and scared. I need this job, Harper, she said, her voice raw. The layoffs were bad. I'm running out of money. I can't ask Mom and Dad for help. They don't have it. So my sacrifice hadn't even bought them a comfortable life. They talk about you, you know, she whispered, fresh tears rolling down her cheeks. They tell everyone you were ungrateful, that you broke Mom's heart. A sharp, painful crack went through the ice around my own heart. I broke her heart. I stood up. Thank you for your time, Ms. Vance. Our HR department will be in touch. I walked to the door and held it open. A clear dismissal. She stood, wobbly, and looked at me, her face a mess of shame and confusion. Harper, please. We have to talk. I'm so sorry. I was just a kid. We did talk, I said, my voice empty. We talked about the job. Jenna will show you out. She gave me one last searching look, but found nothing. She walked out and I closed the door. I sat down at my desk. I had won. I could throw her resume in the trash and send her back out into the world. I could do to her exactly what they had done to me. I could close the door. I buzzed Jenna. Come in, please. She entered cautiously. Ms. Vance, is everything okay? She was crying. The interview is complete, I said. So, that's a no then? Jenna asked. I thought of Maria tossing me an apron, of George paying my bill, of Frank seeing instinct on a napkin. I thought about the word fairness. No, Jenna, I said, call her, Lila Avery, offer her the position, standard salary. Jenna's mouth fell open. What? But she is qualified, I stated. Her experience fits the role. But, are you sure? Yes, I'm sure, I said, my voice hard as steel. Hire her. Why? Jenna whispered. I turned to look at her. Because everyone deserves a chance to build a life, Jenna. Even the people who were happy to watch yours be taken away. This wasn't forgiveness. It wasn't even revenge. This was power, my rules. She would work for me, and every day she would see those frames on my wall and know that I had given her the chance that she and her parents had so easily denied me. That was my justice. Chloe accepted the job. Her first week was a study in quiet terror. She kept her head down and did her work, which was excellent. When we passed in the hallway, she would freeze. Ms. Vance, she'd say, her voice small. Ms. Vance, I would reply, and keep walking. I was her boss. She was my employee. I had won, but the victory felt hollow and cold. That Friday night, I didn't go home. I drove myself out of the city, back to my hometown of Oak Creek. I drove past my parents' house. The paint was peeling. They hadn't built an empire on my sacrifice. They had just gotten older and smaller. I felt nothing. Then I drove to the bus stop. The bench was still there, rusted and broken. This was the place where Cassandra Vance had ended and address unknown had begun. I parked the car. It was a cold night, but it wasn't raining. I got out and took one thing from my trunk, the small black frame from my office, the one with the wrinkled $50 bill inside. I sat down on the cold metal bench, right where I had shivered and wanted to die all those years ago. This time, I was warm in my cashmere coat. I placed the frame on the bench, leaning it against the back. "This is where you said my story ended," I whispered to the empty street. "This is what you thought I was worth." I touched the cold glass. "But you were wrong. This isn't where it ended. This is where I started." I stood up and looked at the strange little object on the broken bench. I didn't need it anymore. I didn't need the reminder of their hate. I had my company. I had my life. I had Chloe safe in my office. I walked back to my car, got in, and closed the door. As I sat there in the silence, a soft sound began, a gentle tap, tap, tap on the roof. It had started to rain. It wasn't the angry, cold rain of that night 10 years ago. It was a gentle, steady rain, a cleansing sound. It sounded, I thought, like applause. I started the engine, turned the car around, and drove away from the bench, leaving the insult behind for someone else to find. I drove back toward my city, toward my life. I had to be at the office on Monday. I had a new PR manager, and there was work to do. I was not a victim. I was not a ghost. I was Cassandra Vance, and for the first time, I was finally, quietly at peace.